Thank you so much, Karsten, I think, for setting the stage for me and for initiating the discussion about evangelism in general. I am so thrilled that we have this amazing panel here today. I'm going to take a quick moment to, first of all, thank all of you for being here. And if we could, before we start off with the questions, can we all maybe have a small introduction of all of you for everybody again, and then we can start with the questions, please. So maybe starting off with you.
All right.
Yeah.
My name is Morten. I'm a teacher and researcher over at the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. And I, research-wise, I think people have called me an ethicist. So I do other stuff, but yes, most of my research has been in technology ethics. My PhD is in information studies, so that it comes naturally to me to discuss technology as it impacts our society and how we regulate it. And in my view, ethics should be at the heart of everything. So that's me.
Hello, hi, I'm Linda Ciavarelli. Thank you so much for having me today. I am the co-founder of House Call VR. We make short-form patient education content, immersive content. Think Magic School Bus meets WebMD. I've been in private practice. I'm in Delaware. I live in Pennsylvania, practice in Delaware for 20 years. I see my patients struggle to understand the basic tenets of their disease. And as a clinician, I have less and less time to spend with them. And so when I was introduced to immersive technology several years ago, I thought, why can't I use this tool to show my patients what I'm trying to tell them? And turns out nobody else was thinking about that because patient education just isn't something that's really valued or hasn't historically been valued. We're working on it. So co-founded House Call VR, actually did a fair amount of sandboxing in Meta's Horizon Worlds. And so interested to hear that referenced here today. I think it's one of those things that sometimes people want to forget happened. Meta Horizon Worlds in XR. I don't think we heard about it once during AWE. Did you hear the word metaverse?
I like to pretend it doesn't exist.
Yes, see? Case in point. So thank you very much for having me, and I guess you're up next.
I am Avi Bar-Zeev, and I guess I could say, I mean, I already spoke, so I think you know what I have to say, but I'll just tell you what you don't know. So I would call myself a technologist, but actually, more realistically, I'm a storyteller. And that is, in my work, my job has been to mostly build prototypes of things that are new, to imagine things that are new, and to never say to the boss, just trust me, but to say, look at this, check this out, try it. Because the people who have the money to spend billions of dollars on making new things, like the HoloLens and the Apple Vision Pro, they're smart, but they need to see the future. They need to see what they're paying for, and to have the confidence to know that what they're building is going to turn out good and not crap. And so I've gotten really good at prototyping and hiring prototypers to build prototypes that can help show people what the future will be like in a small way, a slice of it. It's very hard to build a product that's end-to-end comprehensive. That's the real thing. But you can build slices of it that are very compelling. So I've specialized in that, gotten very good at that, and it's called storytelling because it's about letting people imagine what the future is like so that they can ask these questions about, will it be good? Will it be bad? Will people like it? How will they feel? And the designers, for example, at Apple are incredibly intuitive, really good at sussing that out, but they need something concrete to see to get the feeling of what it's going to be like. They're not futurists in the sense of just sitting in a room and talking. They want to experience things and then see how that plays. So that's what I do. And that's what's given me this experience of all the things that I know go wrong, that I've seen go wrong for 30 years, to start building up a body of knowledge about what to not do so that we have a clearer set of ideas of what to do that hopefully will be better. But doesn't mean we won't make more mistakes. We just shouldn't make, like I said, the same mistakes that we already have.
Love that. I think that's really sets the tone for our first point of discussion today. And I'll start with you, Avi. You mentioned once that the needs of today would not be the same as the needs of tomorrow, especially in our public and personal lives. All of our social, economic, emotional needs would probably be changing, especially when we look at how we use XR. So how do you see, XR being a great fit for these changing requirements and in a maturing market specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think the human needs stay the same. I think we sort of were saying this earlier, right? We all have a need for love and affection and some sort of work that we feel is meaningful to ourselves. Not that everybody always has to be able to get that in one place. Sometimes you have a boring job, but a great hobby, right? But those needs, I think, stay the same. But the technology evolves to hopefully fit the human better, right? That's what I see the journey that we've been on for my lifetime is. We forced, in the Industrial Revolution, forced people to adapt to machines, right? We trained people, even our whole education system was geared towards a sort of assembly line mentality, right? Of teaching the kids how to work in the factory, to build things for everybody else. And now we're finally saying, no, let's teach the computers how to adapt to the people. Let's teach the computers to understand us, to see the way we see, to hear the way we hear, to understand language the way we do. Then that's a dramatic change where ultimately, it's on the mission of making the technology disappear. It disappears into the framework, and then hopefully it's just human to human again, even though computers are mediating those conversations. Maybe over distance and over time. Just as an example, recording people for historical purposes is an example. You shouldn't see the screen. You shouldn't see the camera. We should just see the person and the story. So those are all the good sides, and the bad sides are when we don't remember that and we try to make technology the star or work against human interests, then that's where we run into problems.
That's fair. That's fair. Do you have something to add, Dr. Linda? I think, especially from your perspective.
Yes. So I really appreciate that, and I think that thinking about the needs of humans being the ground level, right? That is what people need, what humanity needs, like sort of as a larger perspective. When I think about the adoption of XR, I think about thinking it more from a practical level. I mean, I'm making a thing and I'm like putting it out on patients' heads and like getting feedback and iterating and all of those. So thinking about the most practical applications that make sense. So for example, as we're developing content at the top of our in 3D, let's make that chart live in 3 dimensions. Really leverage the idea that this moment, all other than us sitting in this room, all of our interactions and communications is 2-dimensional. Even the most sophisticated computers in the world have a 2-dimensional interface. Like right now at this moment, that's changing. And the people in this room and the people who were with us at AWE, those are the people that are going to make it happen to reframe the way humans fundamentally communicate with each other.
Thank you for that. I think, we're talking so much about the experience of an individual, and really, we spoke about ethics before, and it's such an intangible concept. I mean, it's different from each and every. No, it's not? Okay. I stand corrected, but I'd love to hear from you, and that's exactly why I brought it up, because how do you think that is going to change, if at all, as the market matures?
Well, the reason why I say it's not intangible is that it's an entire discipline. One thing that somebody like me who has a philosophical background gets very annoyed at is how the word ethics has been completely misappropriated by the tech industry, but also a lot of other industries. And we've all used it wrong all the way through today. Sorry. Ethics is the philosophy of morals. A lot of the things that we call ethics in daily vernacular today, and what we've talked about it as today, is actually not ethics. It's either morals or guidelines. And guidelines are not ethics. Ethics is the science, if you will, of how we figure out what to do, not what we do or what we should do. Ethics is not what we should do, it's how we figure out what to do. And so, and there is a 2,500-year history of that, going back to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And so I would say it's a very tangible, tangible thing. It's actually, even in philosophy, it's called practical philosophy. That's what ethics are. It's the practical way of implementing thought. So I think it's very tangible. The problem is that there's a lot of different forms of ethics, and there are many different opinions about how we should figure out what to do. Avi had a really great example in his presentation earlier on where you had two different approaches. One was, should we think about this as duty to one another? That's what we will call duty ethics or deontological ethics. Or should we look at the creating the most benefit for the most people, which is what we call utilitarian ethics. So there's already a very big framework, and there's a lot more than that, that we can tap into. And I think this is one of the things I've tried to do in my work, is to try to lean on the 2,500-year history that we have on ethics and implement that in the tech world. And because the problem is, those two, duty ethics and utilitarianism, are actually incompatible. You can't have one and the other at the same time. We might think we can, but we can't. Why? Well, for example, if we decide that duty is what we should focus on, then that becomes very inflexible. That's always the argument against duty ethics. The other one, utilitarianism, can be used to justify slavery. So which one do you want? Now, there's also something called applied ethics, which is one of the three main branches of ethics: normative ethics, which is what I just described, and meta-ethics, which is for philosophers and nobody cares. And then there's applied ethics, which is what a lot of what we've talked about today is. That's where you find business ethics, where you find some forms of tech ethics. And there's a whole massive treasure trove of literature on this that we should tap into more. I think that's the main thing. So no, I don't think it's intangible. I think it's on us to educate ourselves more on this, to be, and especially from a tech platform and tech platform owning perspective. It's something that people need to get more into, and they can hire me. I'm not cheap, but I can be hired.
That was super fun to know. But speaking about, I think, adoption a little bit, since we spoke about that a little bit here, we currently see companies and investors, reaching for enterprise money, and consumer adoption is something which is pretty much up in the air at this point. So, what do you think is each and every what is adoption of these technologies expecting to gain in the long run? And from a different stakeholder group, I think we are all, sort of having a different representation of different stakeholders group. So if you would maybe sort of throw some light on that aspect of it.
Well, I like stakeholder analyses. I think they're really good. I would say for this perspective, I'll go back to what I sort of mentioned earlier, just when I went rogue a little bit. And say that I think I'm not sure that the adoption is going to be forced on people here. I think this is one of the few technologies that's actually going to happen regardless. There aren't a lot of those. When we look at just the past, 40 years or so, there's only been 3 or 4 real big turns in technology. I wouldn't even count. I think it was Carsten who did that in his presentation. I wouldn't even count the smartphone or the iPhone. Not at all, actually, because smartphones were in play long before the iPhone. I would count the cell phone as one. I would count personal computers as one. But the thing about this, I've just got a couple of AI glasses here from a company called Frame. I'm not trying to, I just had them in my bag by chance, that's why I'm taking them out. But the thing about these AI smart glasses that both have cameras and a screen in it, this is $300 and it's open source. And it came out a year ago. That's, I think, what is going to take a lot of people by surprise very, very quickly, is that there's a whole undergrowth right now of smaller companies that are working on platforms like these that people can build apps for. And I would not be surprised at all if we see one sort of Instagram-type company come up with something that is really unique, and then it gets acquired, and that's going to be the one that everybody uses. I mean, I don't know, but what I know is that this particular technology lives up to the one criteria I always have for technologies that historically survive or gets adopted, and this very much tracks with Avi's perception of the human needs. It's basically any technology that does something we're already doing more convenient. It's very, very rare that we adopt a completely new way of doing things. And the thing that these things do more convenient is this. Walking around like this, walking into lampposts, all of that, that's not convenient. That will be able to take that away, and I think that's going to make the big difference.
There is a downside. Did you want to go first? Okay. So you're walking around with your AR, with your heads-up display. Let's say, not call them AR quite yet, because it's just text in space. You might not be as likely to walk into the post, right? Because it's there. It might be out of focus, though, but you're certainly not paying attention to it. And I think the biggest problem is not just walking into the post, but not being present in the world, right? You can still walk across the street and get hit by a truck because you were reading something. And that's one of the things I think. I love the AI stuff. It's the good parts about it. But we have not grappled with the fact that it needs to be much, much better. It needs to be contextually aware. It needs to be watching out for the truck for me, not just giving me the answer to a question that I just asked, but saying, don't cross the street, you're going to get hurt. And I think the most transformative technology out of all this is going to be the culmination of all these pieces into something that most people, I think, don't talk about. There's very few people talk about this, but it's something I'd call the personal AI shield. And it relates to your privacy discussion. It relates to all this. So at home, you have a Wi-Fi router, most likely, right? And it's connected to the internet, to a hard line of DSL or fiber or whatever. And it prevents the internet from coming into your house, except for the content you want. Nobody on the internet should be able to browse your personal network and find your computers, but you could go look at the internet and get whatever content you want. So it's a firewall that protects you from the hostilities of the world. We need that for our persons. We need this notion of an invisible barrier around us that keeps our personal information on the inside. We only share the parts that we want to share, and protects us from hostile forces on the outside. Because unfortunately, it's a hostile world. There's a lot of people out to exploit us. And so that personal AI shield has an AI component. The AI component knows you well enough, because it has all your personal data, knows you well enough to know you're gonna fall for that ad, or you're gonna fall for that scam. Or somebody's trying to take your picture to use it for a bad purpose, or this EULA that you're about to click on is no good. And it informs you and tells you, and that is what, if we build that, that's the one place that I don't always favor technology solving technology, right? We should fix the bad technology, legally, as opposed to just making a countermeasure. But given that we haven't reined it in, we need countermeasures, right? That will even include the idea of electronic chaff, right? Chaff is when, or flares or whatever, that planes want to avoid the heat-guided missiles, so they'll put out a bunch of tinfoil in the air and distract them so that they don't hit the plane, they blow up somewhere else. So that's the idea of putting out a whole bunch of misinformation about ourselves, so that anybody who has a database and it's collecting stuff, it gets poisoned. It becomes useless because we put up, you've changed your birthday every 5 minutes, right? Or you changed your name. This is what Apple does with when it hides your email address or in its AirTags, they're constantly rotating your identifiers. So if anybody was tracking you, they wouldn't be able to do it for very long, or they wouldn't get any useful information. That's the kind of countermeasures. That's going to enable us to be safe, I think, relatively in a hostile world.
An agentic assistant bodyguard.
I'll speak to this from the perspective of the healthcare industry, which of course has, when we think about privacy, there's an entirely different perspective about that. But first, I'll talk about the idea of the adoption from enterprise to consumer. I think that's actually a really interesting idea. Sort of XR came out initially consumer, and then we realized that it's hard to get people to put computers on their faces, and so we thought, okay, the industry, I'll say, how can we create something that we have this technology that can service multiple people, and introduce that technology in that space, and then create, and then there's the continuum, and I think that's what I see. Certainly in what we build, we look at VR as a continuum, where the VR is kind of the why, and the AR becomes the how. So if you think about the why being, a completely different world. This is where we put you, we tell this story about you. And then AR being a continuance of that. And I think that adoption makes a lot of sense to me when I think about the broader industry. In healthcare, obviously there are a variety of applications. And, so for example, we were very lucky to be chosen to collaborate with the VA. Who here knows what the VA is doing in immersive technology? Oh, like two.
Only because I've met your co-founder.
Okay. So would you be surprised to know that the Veterans Administration is the largest user of medical extended reality in the world? They have an immersive technology department. They're all invested. And I actually asked Anne, let me see if she answered my text. Oh, she did. Oh, no, she didn't. Okay. So I was hoping to get some data from her, but I know that they have over 40 use cases. They're using thousands of XR headsets today for a variety of things, primarily simulation and training. How do we train a nurse to draw blood, or a surgeon bring them to competence? Also for treatment, there's FDA-approved treatment of low back pain, PTSD. Skip Rizzo was actually a part of that. So seeing that enterprise being all in on this is, I think, a first step. One thing that we were able to do was to collaborate with them through something called the Greenhouse Initiative, where we were able to do deep discovery with clinical staff. Oh, and I have to say, the VA does not endorse us. I have to say that, so I've said it. Okay. I get in trouble if I don't say it. So to do deep discovery prior to development of our technology, and then to do refinement with the VA, with veterans in places. And that kind of user-centered design leads to a thread from enterprise into the consumer. So we take the consumer, what do you need in your clinic? What are your problems, or what are your problems as you're managing a chronic disease? If we don't ask the people what they need, then we end up building technology in search of a solution, which won't go far.
I'm glad, Dr. Linda, that you kind of brought the topic of, XR growing from enterprise to consumer environments. And I'd love to hear from both of you as well, Dr. Morten, Avi. I think we talked about this a little bit in Marina's presentation earlier today, that exposure to XR applications at the workplace could eventually lead to thoughts like, hey, I want this for myself at home. So how do you see that moment coming in the future, and what is that process going to look like? Do you think that's going to be the future for consumer XR specifically?
I'm not sure I buy it. To be honest, I think there's one lane. I think that the enterprise to consumer path will take in terms of XR, and that's about the development of the actual technology. That because there is enterprise applications, the components are going to be cheaper. And so we will faster get to devices that can be sold at a price that consumers will pay, just because volume is being created. And so I think that's going to happen. I think, but I mean it's already happening. When I see what's happening with Meta's Ray-Ban right now. When I see the same pipeline that Karsten was looking at before, and when I see how people have gotten used to wearables the way that they have, which they weren't ready for in 2014 when Google Glass came out, and I had a pair of Google Glass, and it is, I'm sure Avi had one as well and can attest to this, it was a crappy product. It was bad. It was really, really bad. So anyway, I think people are more ready for it now. So I don't think they enter, like if we're talking about getting into the enterprise now and then there's going to be an XR adoption, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be more simultaneous. And I think we're going to see a lot more uptake in smart glasses and other wearables that are AI connected over the next 3 to 10 years, something like that. But it is very, very hard to predict the future with these things. So.
So true.
It's hard. Going back to the discussion of the evolution of the past of how these things happen, I think despite the Commodore 64, and Amiga, the Mac, PCs I think were largely in the workplace. They were used for word processing and spreadsheets, and then people took them home, right? So it was enterprise first, then consumer for most people, right? Not for me. But if you look at I don't know, somebody can get me the numbers and tell me I'm wrong, but that's my sense of it. For sort of average people, not a computer science geek or graphic gamer, like things like that, right? For smartphones, I think it was the reverse, that a lot of enterprises were very averse to smartphones coming into the office because they were security threats, right? Or distractions, at the very least. I remember Amazon not allowing you to connect your phone to USB because they thought people were going to hack their network. Now they don't care. They maybe have enough security, but it was a huge deal back then to have a smartphone in the office. So that was something that was really useful for consumers, because what did we use them for? Well, we used them for our calendars, but we also used them to keep in touch with our loved ones, right, throughout the day in a way that hopefully wouldn't distract us too much from work. But then the question is, what's going to happen in the future? Well, it depends on the use cases. If the killer use case is, as I think, for XR, it's communication and being connected with people when we have the glasses. We're going to want to use it to stay in touch with our loved ones. Then I think it's driven by consumer adoption into the workplace. And if the killer apps are, I don't know, not in this case spreadsheets or word processing, but if it's, let's say, wayfinding you wear the glasses and they can get you to the right conference room in a building you've never been in, that's a business use case. I don't need that much in my home. I know where to go in my home. Or even in a stranger's home, I just ask them, where's the bathroom, right? But in a corporation, you need this to get people to where they're going, and plenty of other industrial use cases you can imagine. So I don't know which is going to be, but I do think the communication one is the strongest, just because it has always been the human need, right? All the way from storytelling around the campfire, all the way to modern times and telephones, telegraphs, and all that stuff. That has been core to humanity and society and social structure. And so I think that one has to dominate as soon as we have a solution that works. Now, we don't. Like, you put these on, and right now I don't see anything, right? But I might hear somebody. I might have an audio interface that could work pretty well. So that's one of the ideas I like to play with, and I've done a lot. I did try to get that to be a feature of the Echo Frames, that we'd have good audio communication, and I did not succeed at convincing people on that one, but I would like to still make it happen somewhere. But I think once we can see other versions of people's, and you made a point about, maybe, I don't know, all avatars, but at least personas being unethical. I'd like to hear your thoughts later. But eventually, I think we'll have the ability to see some form of the people we care about through these glasses, as if they're sitting in the room, much like Star Wars holograms, right? Except you don't have to hold up a little whatever it is. We just see them, and then we're going to, I think, feel connected. And then the problem will be too much connection. We don't want to see even our kids. We don't want to see them all the time, right? We love them, but we noticed during the pandemic that there is such a thing as too much, right? So it's not to sometimes we have to get work done. So anyway, that's what it's TBD, and it's really waiting on to see what other tools we have to finalize the picture. If it's about the people, how do we capture the people? How do we make sure that we represent them faithfully so that their expressions and their emotions are carried faithfully? In a phone, it just happens because we're recording it literally and playing it literally. But now we have a lot more work to do to make it happen as well, or better.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Dr. Linda, I know you kind of spoke about this in a little bit, but I was imagining, how this could probably look like, especially in patient education, since you spoke about it a little bit. And I think one interesting thought that I was, sort of thinking about was that if at all we imagine that adoption is going to be simultaneous, or say a little bit ahead of consumers in enterprises, do you think the whole angle of privacy is going to be easier to manage? Consumer, because it's in the enterprise environment.
Short answer, no.
No, yeah.
It's not by accident that the two of the largest manufacturers of immersive hardware are Meta and ByteDance. They're social media companies. They're data companies. They collect data. That's what they do.
Now you're talking my language.
I mean, so why? why would a social media company pour billions, tens of billions, it's a lot, lots of billions, into this technology? It's because of the data. And then furthermore, some companies, Meta, for example, gatekeeping their systems and walling it off, that in and of itself, I think that's a huge barrier to any kind of adoption, much less enterprise adoption, and then even further less in healthcare adoption with privacy. So it is exciting to see the OpenXR framework coming online. I think that's very interesting. But to Dr. Bay's point that there is a smaller upstarts. That's my hope. That a smaller upstart can find a way that's cheaper, faster, better than these big companies, and can do it in a way where, for example, we own our data, where we have agency over that. And I think that's a cool line to think about, where you have we're moving from two-dimensional interface of information to three-dimensional interface of information, and maybe we can go from a place where a subset of companies owns our data, and to a place where we are autonomously responsible for our data. We own it, it's ours.
Agency being the keyword.
Can I build on that? So thank you for teeing that up. That is
You owe me $5.
okay. Yeah, I know. We agreed. Yep. We're on an honor system here. Yep. So what you're really moving into there is what we, in my end of the academic spectrum, call platform studies. And platform studies is a growing field right now. There's just a new scientific journal that's been launched that's coming out. And for some reason, and I know at least one person in the room that will be interested in this, for some reason it's the Dutch that are leading the field. I call it either the Amsterdam School or the Dutch School of Platform Studies. The University of Amsterdam are way ahead of everyone else on this. But the thing about it is, and it actually ties into what you asked about before, Avi, what I have against personas. It's not, I don't have anything against the idea of hologram or holographic representations of others. I'm looking very much forward to that reality as well. It's the way that Apple has done it, specifically, because a digital photograph is a reconstruction. It is not like an analog photograph is a capture of light. It is a reconstruction of a capture that happened where a sensor had broken down light into numbers, right? So we're already, whenever we're doing FaceTime or Zoom or anything like that, we're already being reconstructed. However, there is a difference between the perception of saying this is supposed to be a direct representation, so photographic, and this is supposed to be a reconstruction. Somebody talked about, sorry, not somebody, what's her, I'm blanking on the name, I'm sorry, but the woman who was collecting, thank you. So Gilda was talking, sorry about that, Gilda. Gilda was talking about, she showed an example of how personas can represent somebody, and then she mentioned that the hair looked better in the virtual version. The problem there is the intention. The problem is that if you decide that it is no longer a photographic representation of yourself, you are starting to move into invention. Lisa Nakamura talks about avatars as something that can be representations of ourselves, and there's a whole ethics thing behind that. But the problem is, once you get into that invention part, the platform comes into play, and what the platform offers, and what the platform dictates. And all of a sudden, what's happening is we are letting the people or the companies that place themselves in between as mediators, which right now is 5 companies, the mama companies. It's Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet. They get to be the intermediaries dictating how we interact as humans. Now, they're already doing that on social media. They're already doing that in so many other ways. I think if we get to the point where they become arbiters of what we look like when we talk to each other, and we can even go to the extent where we can present a different reality of ourselves as if it is ourselves and expect other people to believe it, I think we're on some morally very, very shaky ground. And I can talk about this forever. I'm going to stop, but it's. I think that's a real ethical problem that we need to address.
I thought I was going to disagree with you, but I agree with you. The way that I would like to capture people to that conversation is more so that when we have lightweight, transparent glasses, we just capture the glasses externally with some set of cameras around us, essentially a holographic capture that's much more like a photograph or video than this interpretation of people. But where I would push back a little bit is I do think Apple is probably aware of that transformation that happens. People do want some of that. They people do want to look better than they think they look often. They want to improve on themselves in some ways. And there are other situations, I think more so with other systems and avatars, where somebody may want to be somebody even vastly different from themselves. So if you look at systems like VR chat, people may manifest as a furry or some other thing. And that's more who they feel as opposed to how they look, or somebody who's trans, or in many cases, women may appear as men to avoid harassment. People of color may appear as white to avoid harassment. There's a whole discussion of whether that's healthy or not healthy, but it may feel necessary in these situations in order to be able to participate equitably now in the way things are without the correct mitigations in place, right? But in general, I think the goal of personas is to make sure the emotions are captured correctly and portrayed. Because I think there's the test that I always described was, if my mother, who's passed away, but if my mother was here, would she say, "Are you on drugs?" Like, if you come across incorrectly, somebody will misinterpret your emotions. They will, in the same way that it happens in email. If you don't say enough, somebody might misread your email and think you're hostile when didn't mean to be. So your emotions can be misportrayed if they're not done well. And that was never a problem when the avatars were just cartoons with poor eyes. But as soon as you start approaching human, we start reading into it, and we think we know what's going on. So you have to get the emotions right. And I would argue that personas do a really good job at that, even though they do change a bunch. And the philosophy in general is, if you don't know it, don't show it. In other words, we don't know where your shoulders are, so we're not going to show your shoulders. We don't know where your feet are, so we're not going to show your feet. But we know where your hands are. We know what your face is doing. That's where all the effort has gone into. And then tell me judge for yourselves if you think when using an Apple Vision Pro, if the emotions are portrayed correctly and you got the correct read off the other person, if you're sensitive enough to be able to read other people, not everybody is, does that work? And if they did, then they achieved their goal. And I would say that was a win for the goal. I could argue it was the wrong goal, but always an awareness that something's being lost because we're not fully capturing the information.
Yeah, I think that's important. What I think is the larger question is, do we want the mama companies controlling how faithfully we represent ourselves when we can't see it unless it's retrospectively? Because I can't see how I appear to other people in the moment. So the big question is, do we want that? I think this is an area that needs severe regulation, to be honest. I think it's good if we can do it. My old boss is the woman that pressed through all the EU regulation, Margrethe Vestager. So it's I'm probably biased in that sense, but I really do think that this is an area that needs to be heavily regulated.
Can I just jump in for one moment, just to say something on that? I think if any medium can do this, it's XR, because when you are embodied in XR, you can be someone else, and you can also see yourself. So I was just chatting with Monica, right? Mallory, about a company called Body Swaps. They do some amazing things. I think they're based in the UK. They allow you to actually inhabit an avatar and you're sort of interviewed by another avatar, and then you switch and you see yourself. And so I think it's interesting to think about using immersive technology to have that mirror, that present mirror, because you can embody. I mean, it has been called an empathy machine because you can have empathy not necessarily just with others, but with self. And that's what we, like, for example, what we build. Every one of our experiences to enter the body, you touch your body because it's not other, it's self. It's putting yourself, making that connection and that empathy with yourself. So I think I agree with what you're saying about that, but if there is a medium to solve it, it's not two-dimensional.
Oh, I totally agree with that, and I totally believe in the freedom to represent yourself as something other. The point just is, if you're doing like it with personas, you're basically getting something that is so close to another person that, or to what you are, rather than something completely different. That
Says who, though?
No. I'm not saying
Right?
you can't do it. What I'm saying is that's what personas are doing, right? What I'm saying is that's that functionality, and I'm just not sure that that's the right way to do it. I think the idea of doing, of having the freedom to express yourself is very, very important. By the way, the empathy machine thing has been debunked by a lot of papers.
I disagree.
I have the literature.
We'll talk later. That's $10.
To be continued.
I have a third opinion, but we can save it for another.
Oh my God. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to put up one last question. And I think unanimously so far through all the discussions, we do agree that we have a good, bright-looking future for immersive tech ahead. My question is, are we ready for the proliferation? Are we ready for massive growth of XR? And for these killer use cases to emerge, for these killer devices to emerge, and what that means for all of the various industries that you represent. You can start. I think
Well,
you touched
the
upon it.
phrase "ready or not," here we comes to mind. I don't know that we are. I think an example of where I think that I have lots of criticisms of Meta, but I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is that they pushed for this low-cost device. It is subsidized. It doesn't cost what you pay for it. It is heavily subsidized. And that subsidy comes from the ad tech business model, right? So whether or not there's ads in the headset, advertising is paying for the price of the headset. And lawyers can tell me if this is considered illegal or not, but there used to be a term called dumping, where companies would sell electronics underpriced in order to kill the competition. That kind of seems like what it is to me. I mean, it feels like it's underpriced in order to make sure that everything else seems super expensive by comparison, where the money is coming from a completely different business. And they're taking a loss. They're taking a huge loss on it. So are we ready for that? No, we didn't need to have 50 million headsets in the market yet, but they wanted to have a business that would compete with consoles. They wanted it to be about gaming initially, and so they pushed it, and they wanted to be price competitive with the cheaper consoles. Then that's the way they pushed it. But and similarly with the Ray-Ban Stories, right? That costs more than it costs, and even with the Orion, they said that each Orion unit would cost $10,000 today. I remember I was like, oh, well, that's too expensive, right? I don't think it was $10,000. I think they're not counting in the cost of all the examples of Orion that failed. Like, in other words, if you to make one successful unit, you have to make 10 bad units that have parts that fail and don't work, which is true of some of this technology. It actually costs 10 times as much if you do the math, right? And that's not counting all the people's salaries and everything else. That's the bill of materials only. So I think that people are pushing things in some sense too fast, too soon, and it's still an iteration of the move fast and break things motto. Get it out there, see what happens, get there first, dominate, own it, win. And it's not being sensitive to what people need and what they want. It's really just trying to win at all costs. So I don't think that part's great. On the other hand, it's put technology in the hands of lots of people who didn't have it. It's made it available for schools. It's made it available for kids. So, it has pushed things in a way that it's going to have big repercussions in the future. I just wish we were being more cautious about it, more thoughtful, so that we make sure that we're not making some of those dumb mistakes that we've already made a million times.
I'd like to add to that I think that, looking back through history, as new technologies evolve, they don't ask for permission. They just do it. And, that's been the human ethos that's brought us, like it or not, to where we are, where it is something that is happening without consideration oftentimes, but what it leaves is the people in this room and rooms like this room to have these conversations and to be thoughtful about what it is that we're developing, why it is that we're developing it, how it's deployed, for whom it's deployed. Is this a technology that's only available to those with means? Is this a technology for solutions for those without means? Is this to rise up, to lift up those that require lifting up, or is it a divider? These are things that they'll shake out, but it'll happen. No one's waiting. So ready or not.
We have though fought back. Like, let's just to put things in. This is a fictional perspective, but imagine. So the CEO of Anthropic 2 weeks ago said that AI is going to eliminate 50% of the jobs, right? For entry level, he said 50%, 20% overall. And imagine he was a James Bond villain who said that, right? He's on an island, and he said, I have this technology or virus or whatever it is that's going to eliminate 20% of the people's ability to work. We would nuke the island, right? We would at least send James Bond or nuke the island otherwise. We would do something about it if we thought it was a threat. And we're seeing threats, we're seeing problems that may be inevitable, but we're also not working fast and hard enough to mitigate, or at least not as hard as they're working to create them.
Agreed completely that there's a lot of opportunity to advocate for thoughtful and meaningful expansion of technology. And it's up to us to have conversations to make sure that when we're sitting in rooms with people who are developing this technology, that we remember to ask the questions, why? Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? And for whom? And, in a profit-driven model, that often is a murky question that people don't like to answer.
To Dr. Bay's point too about ethics, and your very valid points, especially to my simplifications when I ask people what they think ethics are. The utilitarian view may be the one that sociopaths pick, right? And it can lead to really bad things, but I'm trying to reach them where they are. I'm trying to reach people who are on the sociopathic spectrum to say, you can come over this way a little bit, right?
It's also the most widespread way of thinking about ethics in Silicon Valley. It's like affective altruism. That's utilitarianism. If I'm closing it out with that, I would say, I don't think any technology is inevitable, and I think it's really, really difficult to predict what's going to happen with something specific. You and I can talk about STS afterwards. There's what we call the techno-social or the social-technical in my field is the relationship between technology and humans, and the fact that neither really defines itself. We are defined by the tools that we use as humans, but we also define the technology that we use. So it's a back and forth. It's not either or, in my view. I think it's what's interesting is the relation, not the human or the technology. But I will say this about XR: Ivan Sutherland more or less invented augmented reality in 1968. With the Sword of Damocles on DARPA money, of course, because DARPA has invented everything that we use and nothing new has happened in the last 40 years. But the Sword of Damocles in 1968, and then there was the big, as Avi, I'm sure you can talk a lot about that too, the whole 1980s wave of VR, right?
Fix one thing
Yeah.
This is a misnomer that it was called the Sword of Damocles. That was the tracker, the
That's
overhead
right.
mechanical tracker.
Yeah, that's right.
It was actually called the head-mounted display. The
That's
fact
right.
that we call it all HMD is due to him calling it the head-mounted display.
That is, I stand corrected, and you're absolutely right. But the point is that's a long time ago, right? And I mean, the internet, ARPANET, and that became the internet, was set in motion a little before, but then the first connection happened the year after. So this is a technology that's been with us for a very, very long time, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think we're going to be the idea of being able to naturally communicate with computers or with each other through computers goes back to J.C.R. Licklider's Man-Computer Symbiosis paper from 1960. So this is happening. I think that's, I'm not saying the technology is inevitable, but that, since the technology is here, it's one of the things that I firmly believe in as something that's going to last. Because it's been there for so long.
Appreciate that, and I totally agree with it. With that, I think we're almost ready to open up for Q&A, but before that, can we please have a huge round of applause for the amazing panel here? Thank you so much. All right, open for Q&A.
Yeah, we definitely would like to have a discussion on everything that was touched on by this panel. So we have plenty of time before the refreshments arrive. I can start, I guess. I'm going to these microphones. Yes, they're all live.
Can I ask just for a little bit of water while we're
Yeah.
trying this out? Anybody?
So neat.
No. So very thirsty.
So Avi, you're saying when Meta sells me a Quest, they're losing money on it, right? Do you think
it probably costs about $600 to sell you that $400 device?
so? We pay $400, and it's actually should be $600. So the scary vision that comes to me now, that one day when we all have a headset, they're gonna pull the trigger and they're gonna punish us by making us watch either Facebook or ads, but right, to get their money back. You think that's what's gonna happen?
Do you remember my talk from last year here? Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's actually ads. I think they're going to insert products, like think product placement in movies, right?
Yeah.
Like you could do that today. You can use machine learning, right? All this Gen AI stuff could be like, I have a can of Coke in my hand, but you see a can of Pepsi because Pepsi paid for that placement. That could be done today in social media, and I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. It seems like such low-hanging fruit for them to be able to do it. But it's going to be much more immersive, right? So the example I used last year was, you see a car, but every time you look away and look back, it's a slightly different car until they figure out which car you really like. And then that car shows up everywhere. And then they show your best friend in it with somebody else you like and want to date. And they're in the car, not you, and you're jealous, and you really want that car now. And then you start hearing songs on the radio because they control your music as well. Yeah. So you hear music by the Cars, or something that gets you to want to buy a car. I want to drive a car. And, all these songs that kind of get you in the mood. And they can listen to your conversations and figure out how to insert the thing at the right time. And then they can get you upset when they need to get you upset, when they need to lower your emotional barriers, right? Or your intellectual barriers to emotion. Yeah. And so they can manipulate you and push your buttons in all these different ways when they control the inputs and the outputs. That's the game. And then for the glasses, it's now we're going to have a sensor package in the real world. So whatever they were doing in mapping before, right? Meta never really paid for the same things that Microsoft paid Navtech to go drive around, and Google paid for their own cars to go map the Earth. We're going to be the cars for Meta. We're going to be collecting this data for them and building up this model. But not only forward, the other part of the cameras look at our eyes to see what we're looking at. So they'll know what we're interested in. What did we like? How did we feel about what we saw? And that builds up the ultimate profile for each person. No ads. You don't need ads at that point.
Yeah. Wow. Is there any way for us to protect ourselves from that
Don't
total
buy
manipulation? Don't buy Meta products. Okay.
I like the idea of having it, but I would buy that company first. The open source one is much better. Don't just go for the cheapest one. You got to go for the one that's going to be the best for us.
All right. So I'd like to bring it back to ethics and the Fourth Amendment and all that. So a lot of this technology, especially if you're talking about head-mounted devices, depend on things like facial recognition and when you identify someone, knowing something about them so you can tell me something about you. But Europe has things like the right to be forgotten, and I have no idea what happens to those technologies when it encounters someone who asks to be forgotten. So how are you thinking about balancing the functionality of this future we're seeing in these devices with the right to privacy?
Okay, so this is something that I actually teach my students about a lot. There is no privacy absolutism. Privacy is always a trade-off, no matter what. We live in a democracy where we decide to tell the government every year what we've earned in wages. We find that to be completely natural, but that's technically giving away one of a thing that's very personal to us. Privacy is what we decide as a society, and that's where the ethics come in. What is tolerable? And there's a really great little article by Benjamin Wittes and blanking on her first name, but her last name is Liu, that asks the question, or argues basically that we always have to ask the question, privacy from whom or from what? So I think we're going to end up in a situation, and this is actually what they've done in Europe, which is we could certainly, I think, learn from here, is to really think deeply about the situations in which the power structures play into it. So, because the problem with the right to be forgotten is that swindlers and fraudsters can also have a right to be forgotten. So you all of a sudden can't look up this guy that shows up on your dating app. You can't Google the person or find out that they were actually sexually assaulted somebody earlier. That's the downside. But the question then becomes, which of those two scenarios, having a broader data protection from very large powers, and giving the single fraudster the right to be forgotten, which of them would provide the best solution ethically? And they came down on which I think is the right thing to do, looking at the power and looking at who is, like, do we think that Meta is going to exploit the data of the 4 billion people that they control worldwide? Of course they are. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I'm working on a paper on this right now, is that is the biggest problem we're facing in XR in general, is that it's all the companies that are currently running platforms that exploit people are also the companies that are producing devices with losses, right? And pushing it on us. So that's a real problem. But I think, to come back to your question, I think the issue there is to look at the use cases, to look and think hard and long about it instead of making rash decisions. Because the great thing about duty ethics is those are universals. Utilitarian ethics tend to be specific to situations, but deontological ethics tend to have broader application that doesn't really matter what the technology is. And so if we can get to a principle, for example, where we say, well, no matter what, we're going to protect people from big corporate exploitation, well, that can then guide all the different privacy regulations that we make. So I think that is the lesson to be learned from the EU.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
I think we need a microphone.
I don't have one specific question.
Anyone else have questions?
This is our time to discuss with panelists. So.
Okay, thank you so much for providing this forum. It's just incredible. I work with K through 12 students in technology and VR technology, and I'm just wondering how to engage. It seems like parents are brought in when there's a problem, but how, the different policies that you're talking about, how does that affect children in this? Because they are becoming more engaged, they're very interested in all of this. And I'm just wondering how parents can become engaged in this in a knowledgeable way so they can be part of shaping whatever is being said on a higher level?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, before we get to the policy part, right, is just we could do a better job of providing tools for parents to see what their kids are doing in virtual worlds. It's not hard, right? So, as an example, when the Meta headsets came out, they didn't even have parental controls, right? The kids were using their parents' accounts. They could see pretty much everything the parents could see, and there was a lot of inappropriate content. And the parents didn't have tools for going in and monitoring what the kids were doing. And why that's harmful is what happens to somebody in VR is almost exactly like what can happen to them in real life in the equivalent place. If they go to a bar, if they go to a strip club, like, they can be harmed in similar ways except physically, right? That's the only thing that doesn't happen. And even physically, they can hurt themselves while wearing the device, right, in their actual environment. It's not the virtual stuff that hurts them, but all the emotional impacts are just as real as if they'd happened in real life. So in the same way as you wouldn't let your kid go out on the street at age 10, I did, because I'm a Gen X, but that you wouldn't let your kid today go out on the street at age 10 and go to a place that was dangerous. You'd want a chaperone or something with them. That happens in the virtual world all the time. And so we need to give the parents the tools to, maybe they can put on another headset, or maybe even on their smartphone they can go and see what the kid is seeing. Or maybe we can design experiences that parents and kids can do together so that it's actually a bonding activity, as opposed to the kid going off on their own at age 10, which is what the headsets are now being sold to, right? It was 13 originally. And there's a physical issue too, because their heads are smaller. And the headsets are designed for bigger heads, and so the distance between the eyes might not match up with the optics of the headset. A whole bunch of things might not fit right. Anyway, policy questions. Does anyone want to take? I can try, but you want to try to take the policy one? That aspect of what she asked?
I don't know.
How do you involve I guess I'll interpret your question. Tell me if I'm wrong, but how would you involve parents more in the formulation of these kinds of policies? Is that fair? Okay. I could try, but that's out of my wheelhouse a little bit too.
I don't have kids.
Oh,
I can give it a go.
okay.
So, for instance, anytime you're using a new platform, website, they ask if they can use your third-party cookies, and you have to accept it. Or there's some form of consent whereby you're giving them the right to use your data or have access to your data, whatever it may be. I think that it would be overburdensome and over-regulatory if we were to have consent policies. Basically, the way in which you could protect children from obtaining access to nefarious activities online would be similar to having to be a certain age, for instance, to buy cigarettes or to buy alcohol, because it's an impossible task to hover and, be doing oversight on your children 24/7. But you can force parents to have to be present upon purchasing certain items where they could be exposed to certain things that the parents wouldn't otherwise like them to be.
I think maybe fundamental underlying that, what you said, I think, is maybe we're doing consent wrong. Right now, you have to say, it's okay to use my microphone, or it's okay to use my camera, but for what? What are you using it for? That should be the question, right? When a consent thing pops up, it should be, let's take an example. We talked about eye tracking last year, right? Everybody's going to want to share their eye tracking data because it allows their avatar's eyes to be animated, and maybe it gets better performance because the computer can optimize what it's rendering based on where you're looking, right? Those are two good reasons to turn it on. But I don't want it on for other purposes. I don't want it on for the computer to analyze my biometrics for medical purposes and share that with my insurer, right? I didn't consent to that. And so maybe this is a little more like, you're familiar with contextual integrity, Helen Nussbaum's theory about this? So good. But the idea is, and this goes maybe to the parents, is maybe parents do have a checklist for their kids that says, I'm okay with these uses, but I'm not okay with these other uses. And the system can then say, when it's allowed to use the various sensors and applications. But it could say, I don't want my kids exposed to any nudity. I don't want my kids exposed to violence, or maybe violence is okay, but no blood. Like wherever you want to draw the line as a parent, we want to give them the tools to do that, not in the way the technologists understand the pieces, but in the way humans understand the pieces, to say what they don't want, what they do want, what they allow. We've not empowered the parents at all, and maybe once the parents see that, they will demand it more from other applications as well.
I do want to quickly mention that we actually at Annenberg have PhD students who are studying this very thing. Kewan, who sits right there, is one of them. So I just want to say that we are, that there are people working on it.
I guess one last thing I would add, because I remember growing up watching TV, there would be parental controls where certain channels you wouldn't be able to have access to. That same means of protection can still apply in a virtual reality. It's just a matter of the parents being willing to educate themselves and knowing that such things exist. But in terms of, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say. Like, I think that it's possible, but I don't think from a regulatory standpoint it should be mandated. It's too much government oversight. It's going to overburden the courts, and we have enough problems as it is.
Well, without the oversight, what you do is you look at the Quest packaging, the little disclaimer there that says what age you have to be is so small that that only the kids could read it. The parents can't read it if they wear glasses. It's too small. So, but kids' toys, on the other hand, we've regulated them enough to say that the lettering has to be really big, to say that it's a choking hazard, right? Very prominent. Because there have been lawsuits, because of all that wasteful regulation that you're talking about, we now have toys that might be overregulated, but they're much safer than they used to be, right? The old Saturday Night Live bag of glass was, that was what you can get when I was a kid. But when you buy a Quest, you look at the package, like just look at pictures of it, you'll see. It's like nowhere near responsible enough to enable the parents to be knowledgeable. And they buy it, they wrap it, they put it under the tree, the kid opens it, and that's the last time the parent sees it. They're just not involved in that process at all. So I think we really do need the same kind of regulation that went into other toys, because there are harms that are equivalent.
I do think that your idea of making the fonting more visible for parents is a good idea. But in the end, on their own volition, they're purchasing these things for their children. And they have autonomy over their children, and you can't protect people from everything, and you can't stop people from making good or bad decisions, because we don't live in a utopic society.
But you can inform them enough that they are able to make those decisions. And we don't do that right now.
We don't inform a lot of things to a lot of people.
No, there's
a lot of things.
I mean, as somebody growing up in Europe, the idea that we are over-regulating in the U.S. is frankly ludicrous and laughable. What the Reagan administration did and what successive governments have done in the U.S. in terms of deregulation has killed this country. So I'm sorry, I have to very, very, very harshly disagree with you. That's the reason why they're currently setting Waymos on fire out there. So I very, very, very vehemently disagree with you.
I think in the interest of time, maybe we can take the next question, please. Oh, sure, of course.
No, of course.
Yeah.
So I just, ending in on a positive thing, I want to talk about parents and all that. I know we're all talking about positive. A lot of times, if we're going to give it the benefit of the doubt, a lot of times the outcome is not what they planned it. Like, okay, you could have better intentions in something, but a good majority of the outcome is not what is planned. So, and a lot of it is ideologies or stuff, instead of we always care about like the policies in terms of phone numbers, this and this. If we, like the parents or universities, I know they work with technical companies at the beginning, but maybe work on reframing certain things from the beginning better than at the end. It will save time for those companies, saves time for the universities, save time with everyone. That's so when we're talking about like parenting and all of that, that's what I feel the answer should be. Because I was a tester for like 2 months, and a lot of times I feel like sometimes just it's not intentional. It's just that's how the data ended up for certain reasons.
Appreciate that. I think we have one more question.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I have noticed we have two exciting founders. So I wanted to talk about something about XR, VR investment side. So considering your experience, so I think VC also seeking very exciting company, especially in VR side. So how you release the pressure from the venture capital side? I'm so curious about that. I have noticed someone maybe here also have the startup company, also maybe have the interest in explore their own business at VR side. So would you please share some tips or experience?
Yeah, very interesting. Yes, please.
Well, I'll do my best to speak to that. We're completely self-funded, so maybe I can answer your question. It's interesting to see what's happened in XR. I think there was a lot of investment several years ago from gaming companies into health tech companies, which is not a good idea because gaming companies, so XR sort of comes from that gaming lens. And so I think there were a fair amount of funds that were looking for quick subscription, 18-month ARR, like all of that. That is not healthcare. I often say that my competitor is inertia. It's not some other company, it's a pencil and paper. And so the idea that I think it's important to find for companies when they're looking for funding to find aligned investors that understand their vertical, that understand not just this technology. So like people, it's interesting to me that people think of XR as a gaming mechanism, and I think kind of overlook all the other, industrial use cases, healthcare use cases, therapy use cases. I mean, like you name it, there's education use cases. So finding investment and investors that understand your niche and can work with you to integrate this completely new thing. You're integrating a new thing, and then so secondly, on to anyone in here who's developing, I often say I spend about half my time, product time, thinking about what I'm building, and I spend the other half thinking about like implementation. Like how can I make this as easy as possible, as frictionless as possible? And so I think that goes for anyone working in XR. Like, don't build the thing with all the bells and whistles. Build the simplest thing that can work, that can solve a real problem, and use user-centered design from the very beginning, and that creates alignment so that when one goes out for investment, that those conversations can be had with the right investors in the right way that understand where it is that you want to commercialize and that can help you overcome some of the barriers.
Thank you so much. I think with that, we will close the panel for now. We have networking class for that. Thank you. So thank you again. Thank you so much for your amazing thoughts. And we will, of course, resume networking